Welcome to the Draw Shop's Get Genius podcast, where we talk to today's business influencers to pick their brain and pull out their genius. It's time to get genius.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Genius. Today, we're interviewing somebody who is an actual survivor of U.S. Airways Flight 1549. If you remember the movie with Tom Hanks, the movie Sully, the man that I'm interviewing today is a survivor of that flight, and wow, does he have a story to tell. Interviewing Dave Sanderson, and he's an inspirational survivor, speaker, and author, and his thoughts on leadership have really made him an internationally sought out speaker. He's done TED Talks. He's been all over the place. So let me tell you a little bit about his story. He's going to tell it better on the interview, but I'll give you a little bit of it, and then you can hear the rest. When U.S. Airways Flight 1549, or also referred to as the Miracle on the Hudson, ditched into the Hudson River on January 15th, 2009, Dave Sanderson knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. I can't even imagine thinking that in those moments, but he did, and we're going to get to hear his whole thought process of what was going on in those moments. He was the last passenger off the back of the plane on that fateful day, the last passenger. He was largely responsible for the well-being and safety of the other passengers. He was risking his own life in freezing cold water to help other passengers off the plane. And despite the hazards to himself, Dave thought only of helping others and emerged from this whole wreckage with a mission. So now he has a mission, and that is to encourage others to do the right thing. So simple. So today he travels the globe. He shares his inspirational and motivational leadership messages to help people make a difference in how they do business and how they live their lives. And that is 100% what this whole interview is about. Dave is one awesome dude, so I'm super excited for you to get to hear this story. I was super intrigued just to be like, I can't even imagine being in that situation. It's enough adrenaline just watching the movie. So getting to hear it from him himself is pretty awesome. So enjoy. Dave, thank you so much for being on the show.
Summer, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
I feel like it took a little bit of effort to get us together, so I'm super stoked that we are here.
And anything worthwhile takes effort.
Exactly,
so
right? We're going to appreciate that much more.
Yep, exactly right.
So you're one incredible dude.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're definitely, by the way, going to be putting links to your talks on this blog post and on the show notes, because you're pretty awesome. You have an incredible story, and I'm really stoked that our listeners get to hear that and be a part of that today.
Well, we'll hopefully live up to that hype, and I appreciate it, Summer. Thank you very much.
So I'm not even going to beat around it or anything, because your story's so incredible. I'm not going to do any justice telling it. So if we can dive into, how you got to be this incredible speaker, inspiring so many people around the world. But there's a big reason why you're doing that today. So that's what I want to share and focus on.
Well, I appreciate that. So candidly speaking was something that I've seen a lot of people do, and I've been around it a long time, especially with my 10 plus years of being on Tony Robbins' security team and his director of security. So I've seen the best of the best.
Oh yeah.
But I never had the message. But as you know, on January 15, 2009, that all changed when I became the last passenger off the plane to crash into the Hudson River. And candidly, I wasn't supposed to be on the plane. I was supposed to be on the 5 o'clock flight, so I got an earlier flight because our day started early. Because we were working in Brooklyn, New York, in my job, and we were in a distribution center. And that distribution center that day opened up at 2 a.m. So we wanted to get in the middle of the mix, so we started our day at 5 a.m. And that's how we got done early. So I think I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason. And it's like if you've seen the movie Sully, it's pretty accurate. Yeah. It was a normal day. I mean, it was cold, but it was a normal day. And when I heard the explosion on the plane, I was in seat 15A. I looked out the window. I saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing, so I knew something had happened. But I still fly 100 times plus a year, so I thought the plane lost an engine. No big deal, because I know planes have multiple engines. But as we know now, and that those birds hit simultaneous time. I mean, that's what doesn't get talked about enough. Those birds hit at the exact same times. So we only heard one explosion, one big boom on the plane, where I truly believe we would have heard boom, boom. You probably would have had a whole different reaction of what happened that day. So I think that was part of the saving grace. But it was about as you saw in the movie, 208 seconds. It was roughly about 6 minutes from time of takeoff to time of going into the water. And he, fortunately for us, we had a captain who had a skill set that was unbelievable, and he put the time in, as he talked about. He invested those time up front so he could make that one big withdrawal at that moment, and that's exactly what he did. And I give him and Captain Skiles all the credit for getting that plane down. But once the plane's down, now you have a whole other set of problems where, it's down, it's floating in a river, ice cold water, 36-degree water, and water's coming in from underneath the plane, water's coming in from the back of the plane because people, the back of the plane, someone actually did listen to the flight crew and went to that closest exit, which could be behind you, and opened the door up. So now you got water rushing into the plane. So now, where I was 15A, so I was roughly about 3/4 of the way back in the plane. Water was about waist deep on me immediately. Back of the plane was more like waist to chest, and up front it was more like ankle to knee because of the way the plane was situated. But at that point in time, water's rushing in. So now you have a whole other set of issues you got to deal with getting out of the plane. And fortunately for us, no one lost their heads. Everybody, the term I used that night with Katie Couric was a controlled chaos. Yeah. No one was losing it, but people were moving extremely fast. We got to change not only that day, but probably change where I was going to go. As my mom, who had passed away in 1997, kicked into my head. And I tell people the great thing about my mom, I didn't realize this till much later, is that she never told me what to do. She'd always give me a choice and made me make a value judgment based on my values, which I think is a great lesson. And I think I need to do that more with my kids. I think a lot of it is give them the option to make decisions, even if it's bad decisions, so they can start learning how to make decisions young in life. But fortunately for me, I made a decision to go back in the plane and see if anybody needed help. And once we got everybody out, I started making my way out. And then at that point, based on the impact, the bins had broken open, so luggage has flown out, and you're waist deep in the water. So it's you're trying to get out of a plane, and you're running into things as you get up. And all the further I could get up was on the right side door, which was 10F. And my game plan, candidly, somewhere was get out, just get to the wing like everybody else. When I looked out, the wing was filled up and the boat was filled up, and that's why I was in the plane waist deep in the 36-degree water for about 7 minutes, holding onto the lifeboat so it wouldn't float out into the river.
Wow. I mean, my mind is just blown because I can't even think, what's going through your mind, like how do you even shift into that, knowing what to do, how to help others? It just, it blows my mind to be in that situation. What were you thinking?
So fortunately for me, and I mentioned I was with Tony for so many years, being around Tony, which is a tremendous learning experience. And I absorbed pretty much everything that he taught. But in addition to everybody he got to hang with, which is another whole education, being with the people he gets to hang with. So what happened to me is all that stuff started kicking in, that all that training about he talks about state management, controlling your mind and sensory acuity and communicating the modality, all these things that he teaches, I actually executed. And I tell people when they ask me about my experience with Tony, I said, the one thing I know about Tony, I know a lot of things, but the one thing I really know about Tony is he teaches a lot of tremendous material. But one of the challenges he sees, and I understand, is people go to a seminar, they get all hyped up, and then all of a sudden they go home and they don't do anything.
Oh, that is so true. Yep.
And I actually did something with it and employed it and used it, which I hopefully proved not only to myself, but I know to him and his team, and hopefully other people, that if you take the things that you learn and implement them and execute on them, they work. And that's what I did that day. I think that's the answer to your question. That's how I managed my mind. Was I went into that state of it wasn't. I can't really say it's total certainty, but I had certainty. At least I could handle myself.
Right.
And the one thing I teach in my courses and what I talk about is, and Tony taught me this, it's those with the most certainty in uncertain times becomes a leader. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're the CEO of a company or you're the janitor. If you instill certainty into people, they look to you as a leader. And that's what Captain Sullenberger did that day, and I think I did that day, and some other people did that day, is they gave people certainty. So they thought that we may have a shot to get out of this thing. And that's what happened.
How do you give certainty if you don't feel that you have certainty yourself?
It's all about managing your mind, your state management. And people say, well, how'd you manage your state? You're going down a plane and you have no control. And I said, exactly right. It's one thing you learn when you go in a plane crash is you have no control. Yeah. It's going down. But the one thing you can control is your mind. And if you've gone to a Tony Robbins seminar, there's 3 ways to control it. It's through your physiology, through your internal dialogue. It's what you focus on. And I couldn't get up and jump up and down like you do at seminars, right? I mean, I couldn't do that. I mean, we were going down in a plane within 30, 40 seconds.
Right.
How I did is through internal dialogue, the questions I asked myself, what I was telling myself. And I tell people the way Captain Sullenberger managed his day was the power of focus. Yeah, because I realized that not only being around him, but one of his answers to a question he was asked and I was asked, and I asked him, because one of the questions I was asked early on was, do you think Captain Sullenberger was praying? And I said, I don't know. That's a great question. So I asked him when I was with him one time, I said, Captain, when this thing was going on, did you pray? He goes, I didn't have time to pray. I said, I had to focus. He said, I had 154 other people praying for me. I had to focus. And all of a sudden that told me how he managed his mind. And what the pilots call his mental models and how they focus in on something they can relate to in the past and they can put themselves in that situation. Uh-huh. So he used the power of focus through mental modeling. I used the questions I asked myself or in my internal dialogue, the mental model. So that's an amazing skill set, and I actually wrote about that and talked about that a lot. The power of mental modeling.
Oh, mental modeling, right? I'm taking my notes right now.
Yep. Yep.
How did you take notice of how other people were reacting?
I did. I was noticing how some people were reacting, and like the gentleman next to me. He was a younger gentleman, probably in his 20s or 30s. Of course, I'm 50-something, so I mean, anybody's younger than me pretty much right now. But he was a younger gentleman, and he asked me what was going on. And I told him I think he was, we're just going back to the airport. But when we hit, he got up very quickly and just bolted. And I tell people one thing you realize as you go through something, a traumatic life experience, and it's probably one of the biggest learning experiences I had on this, is you can't judge people. You don't know what's going through their mind, and more importantly, you don't know what their backstories are.
Yeah.
So I, because that really came to light for me on a couple things. The first thing it really is there was a lady who was already on the wing, and I was hanging out the door. She came back. She wanted to get back in the plane to get her luggage, and she did. She came back out, and then we got her on the wing, and then she slipped on the wing, and her luggage went floating into the river. And later on, she apologized to a lot of us because. At that point, I mean, the one thing you learn when you're in a plane crash, when you're out of the plane, you don't go back in the plane. I mean, that's just, especially when it's sinking in the river, you just don't go back. And I think she realized that she took the focus and put all the focus on her and took the focus off what was the outcome, get out of the plane. So I learned it, but then people started questioning her, and I started thinking, it's like, yeah, I did too, candidly. But then I said, well, I don't know her backstory. I mean, she may have gold in that purse,
Right.
I mean, I don't know where she's come. So I said, that's one thing I probably has held me back some of my whole life is I judge people pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I said, just think if I didn't judge people the way I did, and I just say, you know what, until I know your backstory, I'll take it as face value. And all of a sudden, my relationships changed with pretty much everybody in my life, including my family.
Doesn't it give you more freedom? It's like one of those 4 agreements, which is don't make assumptions. Because we cause so much stress with the judgment and the assumptions that we make. We create these stories that actually aren't real.
Most definitely. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I look back, and I probably modeled my father a lot as I was growing up through in my relationships and things. Then I started looking back, and I loved my father, and he passed away a couple of years ago. But I remember my father saying things like long-haired hippie freaks and things like that back in the late 60s, early 70s. And I probably had that in my brain, right? It's like, well, people like that are long-haired hippie freaks. I said, how many of those people did I probably turned away because of that, assumption?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I started saying, you know what? I don't really care. I don't care black, white, gay, lesbian. I could care less. As long as you're a good person, like Martin Luther King said, right? Judge the person of his character.
Right.
And so once I changed that model, I said, tell you what, Summer, it opened everything to the point where I spoke at the Supreme Court. I'm dealing with people that I would never deal with in my life before. But now, since I changed that one thing, my worldview has changed everything.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's such a huge takeaway. How have you, based on this experience, what have you gained that you are now able to share with others and help them?
Well, I think the one thing that really stands out. There's a lot of little things that I think that I can impact on people. I work with a lot of people who've gone through a traumatic life event, but what really came to light for me is when now it's about 3.5, maybe even 4 years, going on 4 years, when I was approached to do an interview with AARP magazine, and they approached me to do this interview. I do a lot of interviews, as you probably know. I do a lot of magazine interviews, and in AARP, I said, A, I don't know why you want to talk to me. B, I think I'm too young for you anyway, right? I mean, I'm not old enough to be AARP. What can I add to this old person magazine, right? And then they said, well, the reason we want to talk to you is we learned that you've helped the American Red Cross raise over $8 million at that point. Now it's over 12.8. And we want to understand the strategies on how you grew from this life experience, where a lot of people on the plane, and so many people who go through a traumatic life event, go into depression, and even to the point, like we found out in Sully, PTSD. What's the difference in you? What's your strategy? So I'll do that. So I'll do the interview. And I did the interview, and they shared something with me. They said there was a group of people from North Dakota State University and University of North Carolina Charlotte was doing a study about post-traumatic growth syndrome. And they were using me as an example, and they wanted to talk to me about those strategies that I use to grow. And I said, whoa. So I started learning about this, and I started putting this together. That's why I did a TED Talk last year about post-traumatic growth syndrome. How does somebody grow out of these experiences where so many people go into depression?
Yeah.
And so I shared strategies that I did, and I now do and teach on how to grow from a traumatic life event. Now, and it's been a life-changing experience for me, because I get to speak to not only people who've gone through traumatic life events, like now recently the hurricanes and the wildfires in California. I talk to people, but a lot of sheriffs, law enforcement, military, people who come back who have challenges and they don't know how to handle them. So at least I get a chance to talk to them and give them strategies on how I did it, and that gives me great satisfaction.
How have you helped, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening, how have you helped entrepreneurs based on, I know you talk on a lot of different topics. How does this apply to entrepreneurs?
I think the flight 1549 is a case study for how people and relationships interact and how to manage things when things get tough. And as we know, and I'm an entrepreneur now too. I worked for a corporation for 30 plus years. So I came from a corporation to starting something scratch, which was a learning experience for me. And I used a lot of things that I learned in business, but you think you know those, and all of a sudden you get out in the real world and the entrepreneur, and you really don't. But entrepreneurs are risk takers, and they're all going to go through, which I call, and if you've heard me ever speak or say anything, I call them personal plane crashes. And every entrepreneur is going to have it, whether it's a cash flow situation, sales, personnel. And I went through the same thing. The one thing I did, and my other entrepreneurs told me, I did things backwards, where I could drive sales like nobody's business, but I didn't know my backside from my front side when it came to administration. So I got in cash flow situations and receivables, payable situations where I had no clue. So I tell people the things I talk about is these strategies that Tony teaches, like, I talk about, of course, leadership and persistence and risk assessment, how to assess risk very quickly, make value judgments based on these things, how entrepreneurs can really not only do those, but also then I teach them on these strategies on how to drive sales quickly. And because I did 30 plus years, I was a top producer in every company I was ever with, Summer, and I knew how to sell. And so I only do that, teaching from the leadership and management side, but I teach people these strategies on how to sell that Tony taught me, that candidly took me to the top levels of every organization I was with.
Are you going to be able to share a couple of those with us?
I'd be more than happy to share if you ask the right question. I tell people,
all right.
and that's part of the secret right there, asking the right question.
Exactly. So let's ask a couple of questions, because as entrepreneurs, we're all in some way or another selling our services or businesses, or we have a team that we need to train in how to sell. So a big question is, how do you overcome the objections? So
I learned objections way back then, and there's a lot of ways to handle those. But of course, the goal is you want objections. But the way I used to get around it is, of course, I build relationships and say, well, that sounds easy. Everybody can build a relationship. You might build a transactional situation. You may not build a relationship. And so one of my strategies that I use, and I started this back in the early 90s when I first met Tony, and he taught me this strategy, and I'm like, you know what? It sounded good, so I implemented it. And all of a sudden, I was getting into the CEO and CFO suites where everybody else is sitting out with the IT guy or the controller. And my management, especially my last company, said they couldn't understand how I did. I said, well, you never asked me. There's a question right there. You asked the question. And the two questions I would ask people is what's most important to you and what has to happen for you to realize that? And once I start asking those kind of questions, I find out from people what they value most and what do you have to do to make sure they get that value. And all of a sudden, I had the strategy on exactly how to manage that situation. Because it comes down to 6 basic things, Summer. I mean, then once again, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I believe in using all this stuff and just putting it together in ways to make it work. And Tony talks about the 6 human needs, about the need for certainty and uncertainty, the need for, for significance, the need for, connection, the need for growth, the need for contribution. And those questions, if you ask that first question, those sort of narrow down which area of their life drives them the most. And once you understand that, and you understand the second question, what has to happen for you to realize that, and all of a sudden you're understanding what they value most in life and how you can help them achieve that. And if you can help somebody achieve their highest value in their life, you now not only become a relationship, you've become a trusted advisor, and all of a sudden you're sitting in the C-suite while everybody else is sitting out in the lobby, and they're calling you. It's like, hey, I need your help on this, and you're helping them with problems you never thought you were. And all of a sudden, it's not a sales, it's a relationship. And that's how those 2 questions turned my career around.
Right.
So in handling objections, I try to get around it by finding the value. And of course, you're going to have technical objections, and candidly, that's going to happen. And you address those. But I always go for the value set of what that person is, and I try to address their value sets. And candidly, it didn't fail me too often. It was amazing because now I work with an organization called the Hero Club, and it's around the C-suite. I basically deal with over 80 C-level people from the biggest companies in the world. We collaborate, and I'm really focused on leadership and sales and helping them understand these strategies.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And asking those questions is so important because it really makes it about them and what it is that is important to them. What are they trying to solve? What's their pain point?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a sign right in front. I'm looking at my screen now. It says, it's not about I, it's about why.
Right.
And once I start realizing, keep going in my head, it's like, it's not about me. Once I make it about me, then we're going down a different direction. Yeah. We're going down the tubes, basically.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, it's funny because I think just that your answer to that question actually answers a lot of questions when it comes to sales.
Yep. I agree. Sales is not that difficult, and a lot of people make it difficult, and I made it difficult too. I'm not pixie dust of sunshine. I mean, everybody's got their times, and sometimes you go sideways. But as long as you start focusing on the values of the other people, and it's all once you do that, you're sitting in a different place, and that's why people can never understand. That's why I give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example. The day of the plane crash, I was with a company as a potential client in Brooklyn. And we spent 3 days together going from Sarasota, Florida to Petersburg, Virginia, and we were doing basically system studies of their whole systems. Well, my company didn't call me that night in the hospital, and my company asked me to go the next week back to Michigan to another business meeting where my potential client, they're not even a client yet, Summer. By the time I got home, there was a box probably 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide of their products and materials as a way to say thank you for investing your life into trying to help us with our business. And once I saw that, I got emotional. Got emotional because all of a sudden I realized I had a relationship there, and if I went down, my company probably wouldn't have gotten the business. And that's when my company started realizing it's like, this guy's got a relationship which we can't buy. We can. So once you do that, that's how you become invaluable to companies.
Yeah.
That one thing right there, and I've had many companies that do that. But it's just and that's what I do right now as an entrepreneur. Whether I'm speaking or whether I'm having a relationship with workshops and things that I do is I want to find the value set, and that's why I do a pre-call with everybody that I do. It's like, okay, and I know what I'm driving for now. We're going to really focus on teamwork. We're going to focus on teamwork. This talk's going to be about that, and we're going to go deep on how to do these things. Customer service, we'll do the same thing. Those kind of things.
So I think there's a question I want to ask. I don't know if you'll have the answer, but for some people, it's difficult to even know, believe it or not, even if they have a business, a service, a product, whatever it is, it's hard for them to actually pinpoint what value they themselves actually bring.
Yep. And that's why you ask yourself that same question.
Yeah.
And what's most important to me, and what has to happen for me to realize that. And so, that's, people ask me all the time. I said, what's your mission? I said, well, my mission right now is pretty simple. It's I impact one person every day. And as long as I keep it simple and I know my mission statement, I lived in my mission statement, that's those two things. In my company, my little company, I've only got 3 people. I'm not like one of these gargantuan companies, but everybody on my team must align with my mission. And that's core. And when they're not aligning, and that's when we have to have conversations. And I've had a couple conversations because, we know what, we're in here to impact people's lives. That's why I'm with you today. If one person hears this, is impacted and learned something, then I've done my job today with you, Summer, and you've done your job.
Yeah, and you can check me off for today as your one person. Right. So there we go.
there I go. Then we move on to tomorrow. Yeah.
So you're talking about team and being in alignment. That's another thing that I feel like a lot of people know that. And I mean, especially the people that, a lot of our listeners, they know it's an obvious thing. Your team, you should all be on the same page with the company's mission and all be in alignment. However, it seems that they don't actually have that going on in their company. Yep. They can't figure out how to get there. So, if you're not starting from scratch and you've already got a team, but you're feeling that there's, it's just not jiving right, you can just feel it. Like for me, it's something that, when something's not right with people that you're with, or you kind of just feel it. It's like a gut thing for me. It's like, this is probably not somebody I'm going to have any type of relationship with, instinct, whatever it is. But do you have some tips in terms of building that right team? And if you've already got a team, how to bring that harmony and that same vision together?
I'll give you a little bit of a case study, very quick case study, and then a short story on how to answer that question. So, as I mentioned, I think the Miracle on the Hudson is a case study, and part of that case study is this. One of the things that I found out after speaking with Captain Sullivan, he told a lot of us, that's just me, so I was in a group of people, but he said, why do you think this turned out the way it did? And we're all going, well, Captain Sullivan, you did a great job, right, this and that, you got it down. He said, no, it was the passenger makeup of the plane. And we're all sort of looking, I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, just think of this. He said, roughly 90% of the people on this plane were business people. They fly out in and out of New York, right? Bankers and lawyers and me, salespeople. He said, just think of I or a pilot could do this in Orlando or Anaheim. Doesn't matter. Take your pick. Yeah. And we get it down to the water, right? It doesn't matter because the passenger makeup of those planes is completely different. He said it all came down to the team on that plane. It all came down to the people in the right seats on that plane. Because everybody in that seat had focus on what? The outcome, the mission. I'll go back now to 1999 when I had the honor and privilege of escorting a guy by the name of General Norman Schwarzkopf. And I had the opportunity to do that in Hawaii. And I had him for basically 4 hours. And I've never been around a 4-star general, but it can be quite intimidating. And I was pretty intimidated. So, but I asked him a question, and basically the question was, how did you win the war in Iraq so quickly? And he gave me an answer. I said, may I ask you another question? He looks at me and said, no one ever asked a general a second question.
Oh.
And I like looking at him like, whoa, I stepped over the line, right? He said, but I said, I'll tell you, he said, every day I come into the theater, the troops would come to me, management would come to me and said, women couldn't drive tanks to Saudi Arabia. Women had to cover their heads. They had to pray 5 times a day. And I kept reminding my troops and management, well, how does this contribute to kicking Saddam out of Kuwait? He said, I had one mission, and all I did all day long is remind people of the mission. And when the people got off mission, I had to remind them again and course correct. I had to get the right people in the right places because they had to focus on the mission. All of a sudden, within 30 days, the war is over. And they also explained to me why he didn't go to Baghdad to clean this thing up once and for all, because it wasn't his mission. Yeah. So that's the answer to your question is, as a great manager or great leader, the goal is to give people the mission, give people the keys to be able to check your ego at the door, let people execute on the mission. But if they're not executing, you got to course correct quickly and get the right people to do it. And so those people who are struggling with that on their teams, set the mission, focus on the mission, make sure people understand it and buy into it. And if they don't, then get them someplace else or wish them well and get somebody who can, because candidly, you'll never be at optimum. And there's never been a war that has been won that quickly by the United States, ever. because they executed on his mission and he was in and out.
Right. Well, yeah. And the other thing is just being so clear, like you said, and being simple on it. Sometimes people get really complicated with a mission to the point where they're not even clear anymore on what it's supposed to be.
They get caught up in their shorts, right? It has to be intricate, this and that. And if you can't understand it in about 15 seconds, you don't have the right mission.
Exactly. Right? I know you speak on leadership as well. And I think this kind of, this ties in, all of it ties in together. But what tips do you have for us, me, a leader of my company, our listeners that are the leaders of their company, in keeping people and keeping your team together and really feeling valued and wanting to do the best that they can for your business?
Well, thank you. So you've already talked about get people focused on the mission. But the second thing was something I learned years ago from probably my first vice president I really respected in business. And he asked me, he was ready to promote me to sales manager. I was a top producer, and it's time to cut this guy's pay and make him a sales manager, right? So he got me in his office. He looked at me and said, "Dave, as a manager, do you want to be in control or do you want to be in charge?" And I was sitting there going, "What's the right answer?" There's no right answer, right?
Right.
He had to, but I said I want to be in charge. And he said, "Why don't you want to be in control? How can you control your salespeople?" I'm like, I was questioning myself, right? So I had uncertainty. But if you're in charge, you basically give people direction, and you let them make the calls, right? And you check your ego at the door. And so I said that was my answer. A lot of people when I asked the people that question, they said, "I want to be in control because that way I know exactly what's going to happen and have certainty." But then I said, "Well, what happens on a plane crash? You have no control."
Right.
Yeah. So that's the second thing I would say is really around, do you want to be in charge? Do you want to be in control? And the third thing is once again, you just got to keep the mission. To me, is if you don't have the right people who understand the mission and buy into the mission and respect the mission, then candidly, I think it's going to be a challenge. So I would say those two things is, focus people on the mission and find out, don't want to be in charge or be in control. And then don't be afraid, of course, to fail. I mean, there's a lot of us are afraid to fail because we look bad in front of people and we try to cover it up and we try to go sideways. And you know what? The one thing I learned, I try to do that too. In the past, I try to cover things up. Of course, you look like an idiot sometimes, but what I found out is by those mistakes is the one I really learned, and that's when I started excelling my career. So can't be afraid to fail.
No, exactly. Those are some of the best lessons. So I think there's just so many things so much value that you bring in all of your talks. Like I said earlier, I'm definitely going to have a link to your videos, your TED Talk. I mean, just like incredible stuff. What an experience you have been through, and you have this in a book as well.
Yep.
Moments Matter.
Moments Matter. Yep, and that's my book. I was contributing author to a book called Brace for Impact. That's a little piece, but Moments Matter is my book, and it's you can go on my website at davesandersonspeaks.com, or you go on Amazon and get it in a Kindle version or online. I appreciate checking it out because I talk about these 12 pillars or resources that I use that day and how they relate to business and entrepreneurship, whether it's persistence or faith or leadership or teamwork or risk management. I talk and go in depth and give people the backstory to that of how to really do that, not only when you're facing a life-threatening situation like I was, but a challenging situation, or as I mentioned, a personal plane crash in your business or life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to make sure that we have a link to the book as well as everything about you, which, yes, is on davesandersonspeaks.com, but we will have a link to that. Can people reach you directly through that site?
Sure. I don't have a personal assistant now, Summer, so right now it comes straight to me as Dave Sandersonspeaks.com, or they can go to Facebook on my page at Dave Sanderson Speaks on Facebook, and I interact there. Twitter's Dave Sanderson too. And I do a little bit there, but that's why I do my quick stuff. But LinkedIn is where I'm really getting a lot of interaction now on David Sanderson. So that's where I get my sort of these business lessons and strategies that I lay out. But what the latest thing that's happened for me, Summer, and is I've was approved. I'm on Amazon Alexa's daily flash briefing at my own show called Dave Sanderson Declassified.
Oh, that is awesome.
And I take these strategies all these leaders have given me and break them down and how did they do them. And so what the takeaways you can take from whether it's a Tony Robbins or if it's from a Justice Kennedy who I was with, or from all these different leaders I've been with. And so, yeah, every day I have a new one, and or if you don't have an Echo on Amazon, just go to my website. I put the link out there likewise about 5 hours after it goes up on Amazon. But I'd also like to offer your folks, Summer, if they text 797979 and put brace, the number 4 impact, and I'll send them as a free gift for listening today is my first video of my upcoming course on overcoming adversity in challenging times.
Oh, you're so awesome. And, that was 797979.
Yep. And put the word brace, the number 4 impact.
Okay.
And they will get the video within 30 seconds. And all I ask is to watch it, but pass it on to somebody else who may be having their own personal plane crash in life.
Oh, I love that. Dave, thank you so much. This is incredible. I'm in awe of you, what you've gone through, what you've done with it. And I thank you for that, for all of your contributions. And I'm so happy that you joined me today.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's Get Genius. You can learn more about The Draw Shop at www.thedrawshop.com, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Your home for kick-butt custom whiteboard marketing videos. Your ideas come to life. Thanks for listening. Please share, comment, and make any suggestions for future Genius guests.